All right, so today is Monday, November 27, 2017. This is the Kubernetes CSI implementation meeting. So first of all, huge congrats on getting all the entry bits checked in before code freeze last week. Glad you're a rock star. Thank you. So we're looking green there.
Awesome.
The next bit that needs to go into entry, which can go in after code freeze, is end-to-end tests. Luis has been working on this, and looks like he's had some progress over a long weekend. Luis, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, quickly, I had some issues that you saw on the channel where it wouldn't even recognize cluster roles and things like that. It was very weird. So I, on a bad note, I spent a lot of time on that, trying to figure out what that was. And in the end, it ended up being somehow like cleaned everything up. I even installed it in another zone and everything started working. It was just weird. So, so anyway, I was able to this morning finally able to manually create use the external attacher, just the attachers, not the CSI plugin yet, not Vladimir's code yet. Just the external attacher. I was able to manually deploy it on a real cluster. I was able to create a PV, create a volume attachment, and have it. I watched the logs on the external attacher react, and then I saw that the volume attachment went to status attached. That was good.
Nice.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I needed to do to enable this, which also took me a little while. First was what we described down at the bottom of the minutes, which is we need to set the value of, let me just get this right. The value of runtime config set correctly.
Okay.
Right? That everybody knew. But I didn't know about this one, feature gates. I needed to set feature gates correctly so that CSI persistent volume equals true was able to be used inside a PV.
Yeah.
So, so I set those two things and I was able to succeed today. So that's good. So the only thing is that my question is to you guys, once I create this E2E test and then I submit it, how is it that the contest test succeed? Because it requires just two things on the cluster.
I think there is a way to be able to set a feature gate, toggle a feature gate for inside of an end-to-end test. So if you look through the code base for something like toggle feature gate or something like that, so there should be existing examples on tests doing that. As for setting the runtime, you'll have to dig around. I'd suggest poking somebody on the test SIG and asking for advice there. I'm pretty sure there's folks that have run into this in the past. There's a solution. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah. Nothing's better than going to the shell scripts and figuring things out. So, but that's where I am today. Right now, I'm actually editing the code so that I can just do the external attacher and detachment.
Okay. That is solid progress. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, question on detachment. So attachment works. I can see a status and volume attachment. That is excellent. But on detachment, I can't. There's no really a way to verify that a detachment occurred because you delete the volume attachment, right?
Yep. So two things you would need to do. One is verify that the API object is eventually deleted.
Yeah.
So have some sort of timeout. If it never gets deleted after that timeout, that means something went wrong.
Okay.
And you should set that timeout to long enough that it doesn't artificially flake.
Sure.
And then the second thing would be, since you're manually creating the PV object, you can go and poke the control plane to see if it actually exists or not. So just check, does this disk exist? So there's, I think, existing if you look at some of the existing PD tests for GCE PD,
Yeah.
they do this already. Going through the standard entry volume plugin, they'll
I see.
verify that the volume is detached. But actually, since we're not even deleting the volume, so yeah, you could just check the state of the what it's attached to by directly talking to the GCE API.
But it's a mock thing. It's not
Sorry?
really real. It's a mock driver. There's nothing
Oh,
really
we don't have
attachment.
any.
Yeah.
Right, that's a good point.
I may have to
So I think
maybe.
we'll need to do various layers of tests for the one that's just absolutely a mock. One, we would need to verify that the volume attachment object eventually gets deleted. And then two, we could make the mock fancy and have some way for you to probe it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Sending, maybe creating a third container that I can actually interrogate, something like
Yeah.
that. But I think that that sounds like something I could punt on for now.
Okay.
So,
I'll keep throwing that in there, is the fact that, you know, the code team has that VFS driver, which just uses a local file system to mock a file system. So
cool.
that's something to keep in mind if we're looking for an actual driver that works for testing.
Okay. Thank you. You know, the way I'm writing it actually is I want to be able to have people, developers, us, who write CSI drivers, be able to just insert it as a line in a like a list of drivers, and I want this whole test just repeat for every line of drivers that we have.
Mm.
So as more drivers come in, they'll just add a line there for a new container. It should just work. I mean, it's the same thing, right? So that's the way I'm going to write it. So I'm just going to punt now on the verification of the unattachment. Now, since I created the PV and the volume attachment objects, when I delete the PV, I also need to delete the volume attachment. It is when I start testing the CSI plugin from Vladimir's code. When I create a PVC, it takes care of all that.
Correct.
Garbage collection for me. Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So hopefully I'll be able to send that today. That's my goal.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
For the external changes, I still have not started on the kubelet registration. I took a nice long Thanksgiving break and didn't work. So I'm planning to get to that today. For the external provisioner, I don't know if we have a status update from rootfs. We should poke him offline to see what the current status of that is. And then end-to-end deployment packaging, I think you've been working on this in the background, Luis.
Yeah, I've been putting down a hold until I get started, finish something with the E2E.
Okay.
So, but as soon as I'm get to a good state with E2E, I'll get started on that one.
Okay.
So
that sounds good. And then, so for these 4 components, we really need to finish them up as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try to set an aggressive deadline of Wednesday or Thursday. It's up to you guys. That way we can start actually doing complete packaged end-to-end deployments. And early next week, they're asking for a draft of a blog post. So if we have something where we can, show exactly what the steps are and be confident that we have something working, we don't have to have all the bugs ironed out, but have all the basic components ready. That would be a good thing.
Okay, I can start on that. Where's the documentation should go in Kubernetes CSI?
Yeah, Kubernetes-CSI should be a good place to start, and then we can move it around from there as
like /doc maybe, and just put a README there.
Yep, that works.
Okay,
that works.
Speaking of documentation, we probably will need documentation for the official the official Kubernetes website as well.
Yep. So
So should we start it on that one instead?
Yeah, like we could do, we could put it like it's going to be up to you, Luis. If you want to put stuff into Kubernetes-CSI and then have the official documentation linked to there, or like have the more detailed version on one side and have a high-level skim on the documentation. Kind of up to you how you want to.
It depends. What is the expectation, for example, or for something alpha, like local files, local storage? What was their style?
As long as you explain what the expectations are, you should be okay. I mean, this is alpha, so you would blatantly be saying it is alpha.
Okay.
And this is how you would test it, and that's it.
I think I would like to start it on the website, just like Vladimir mentioned. And
yeah, it's an easy process. It's a different repo altogether.
Yeah.
The merging is a little faster. So yeah, it wouldn't be. And now the problem is I don't. Where would you? So there's a section specifically for volumes there.
Yeah. I think
I would imagine this would go there.
Yeah,
under CSI.
Yeah, I would. If you guys find that you probably need two sections. One for how do I enable CSI in my cluster, right?
Okay.
And another one is how do I enable a CSI plugin as part of the persistent volume claim, like the way that they do it. Like they have a little section for persistent volumes. They have a little section on the side. But I think there needs to be a main page for CSI towards the top that then goes off to those little sections throughout the document. Does that make sense?
I would suggest, that's just a suggestion for now, just follow what the other volumes or persistent volumes.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I agree with you.
And as we get closer to release, maybe have like the actual definitive documentation, because the documentation is easy, but it's still a couple of steps to get it in.
Yeah.
Should we break these two into two pieces, the end-to-end deployment packaging and documentation? Because it sounds like documentation is going to be like...
Yes. I think documentation can be its own thing.
Yeah.
So if I'm not sure what all, so I'm probably going to be ready to jump in just in case, as Louis getting into end-to-end, we're finding more, finding bugs. But I could jump in and start doing a generic documentation.
Okay. Luis, would you be okay with that? With Vlad helping out there?
Yeah, I actually, the way I was thinking of, Vlad, if you want to do it, if I could suggest, is if you focus on the PV part.
Yeah.
Very internal, and then since I'm doing E2E, I'm looking at it from the top view.
Right.
And I could write that one.
Yeah, what I was thinking is something to basically, for somebody who assumes that the version of Kubernetes already has CSI, and how would they get started? If you're creating a PV or PVC, what do you need to put in the YAML to get things going? So I probably will need a little bit of the cluster setup you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me think about it. Probably gonna ping you offline.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah. Because we'll probably need something.
Yeah.
If it's not, I'm thinking maybe for now something to introduce to CSI in the section where we have the traditional entry volumes, and then later on maybe have something that's completely dedicated to CSI that has all the nuts and bolts.
But the way I'm thinking about it is, I was reading yesterday as an example, was the one for local storage, which is an external. It's an external dash provisioner, right? It's on that repo, and they have a README there that says how to set up the cluster, how to set up things. And so,
Example.
yeah. So what I'm thinking is that what I would like to see is that, as a suggestion, is that in the Kubernetes documentation, have a page of saying how to set up CSI for the cluster, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's how CSI works. Here's the flow. Point to the documentation of the internal stuff, as references, and then
Tell stuff.
yeah, and then have in the PV section where there's iCUSY, NFS, and all the other ones.
Yep, exactly.
Add the one for CSI.
CSI.
So how about this? Let's break the documentation into two pieces. The internal documentation, which will go into the Kubernetes repo with the official documentation, and then the Kubernetes external, which will be modeled after what you're saying, Luis.
The external block, no, the local
Kubernetes-CSI repo.
Yeah.
So that way, we have two
saying
distinct areas where we're checking the documentation into, and we could potentially break this in where, Vlad, you could do the official documentation and work on the external documentation.
I was thinking that both of them go into the Kubernetes.io one.
Oh, so the problem with the Kubernetes.io one is, so I was thinking it might be harder or more challenging to keep updated as we revise it.
Yeah.
Since it's kind of tied to, well, it's kind of.
The thing is that as a user, this is as a user coming in.
Yep.
And I'm getting this experience because I'm coming in not knowing the internal stuff so much, right? I'm coming as a user. And I would like to see a page on Kubernetes that describes to me, how do I set this thing up, right?
Yeah.
If I have to point out to somewhere else, then it's already, I don't know if it's out of sync or something.
That's how I would say all of them work, except they don't go to an external repo. They go inside the, it used to be example volume, and then you put your examples in there. But I think it's been moved since to staging, or I think it's in, was it community staging or something like that? But basically, it's the same model.
Yeah. Okay.
Goes into the official documentation, and then there's whatever you want to get deep into the volume or the plugin. It goes into that location, but it's not a different. Actually, it is. It's under community. I can't remember exactly where it is, but it's under community. Volume, example, etc., etc. So
what I was trying to say is the way that this is exactly what I would like to see. What you wrote down.
I'll find the links. I'll show them. I'll put them out. But yeah, it's two. I think we're all in agreement. It's two places. One place introduces the official volume, or I guess storage. Yeah. And there's a place that can be updated quickly in a README somewhere that you have more detail about the plugin.
Yeah, I mean, the way that Saad just has it broken up is exactly what I would like to see.
Yep.
In the Kubernetes.io is the user view. How do I set up my cluster to be able to enable this, right?
Well, actually, that may not even get into that, because that documentation is more of an introductory of the concepts, very, very high level. Very high level example. Maybe you might put a YAML in there, but it usually doesn't go into deep detail because, like Saad was saying, a lot of this stuff changes all the time. So if you put it in there, then you have to wait for the next release for that documentation to get updated.
I think there's a way to be able to update it, but it's kind of,
have to wait for
not updated very often.
So I'm just asking now because I want to make sure we're okay. So as a user, I want to deploy and I want to start using my CSI driver from X, right?
Yep.
And I say, okay, how do I get this thing working?
So here's what I would do is I would make the assumption in that documentation that how the driver is deployed, don't worry about it. Just assume that it's already deployed on the cluster and talk about how to consume it. And then you have two bits of how-to that are not going to be present there. One is, how do you deploy the driver? and two is how do you create the driver to begin with. And
that's fine, but it's the step way before that is how do I set up my cluster to enable this?
What do you mean set up the cluster?
Like the things that I had to do here with feature gates and runtime configs. Because the clusters, no cluster is going to allow you to do this unless
right.
you.
So I think as part of how to consume it, like the blurb, right, there should be like a box or something right at the top that says this is an alpha feature.
Yeah.
In order to use it, you must make sure X, Y, and Z are true. That the runtime flag is set, that this feature gate is turned on, and that a compatible CSI driver is deployed on your cluster. And
that's exactly that.
How the CSI driver is deployed, we don't need to go into the details of that.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So where does that sit? That code.
That should be in that first bullet.
Okay.
So
what page?
Warning, alpha feature and required feature gate info, plus how to use CSI, assuming it is already deployed on cluster. And then the second documentation here could be how the developer creates.
Yeah, that one's up for developers. That one's easy. I mean, that one we can change all the time. That one is super fast and super fluid. But the first one is the one I'm more concerned about. Is like as a user.
Okay.
How do I make
so how about this? Are you guys okay with this split up? Vlad, you work on this documentation. Luis, you work on this, and then you guys could review each other's work.
Yeah, I mean,
that's fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just looked at there is a location inside Kubernetes itself under example / volumes / whatever the volume is, where you usually put the more detail in a bunch of examples, etc.
Okay.
And that is intended to be changing as the volume is evolving. And then there's another portion of that documentation, which is very high level, like you were saying, Saad. That's meant to show you how to consume it, not necessarily how to set it up, etc.
Yeah,
show you
what I'm talking about.
It is, how to consume it, and very short.
So that examples thing, I think the docs people really hate it because they can't control it, which is annoying for them, and they can't do whatever they want to do, internationalization, whatever. It's like this random.
No, I completely understand.
So I'm not sure what the correct guidance there is. You may be correct, but I don't know.
I'll poke around because I think there's a Slack for documentation. I'll poke around and see what they say.
All right, so I think we've got a general direction then. We'll break this into two pieces. Vlad, you'll work on the entry part, and Luis will work on the external part, and then we could review each other's stuff, and hopefully we come to a place where it all makes sense.
Yeah, as soon as we get started, we'll start noticing. So.
Okay.
I'll make a docs repo also for that stuff.
Okay.
External.
And then the other question I have for you, Saad, is as Luis is doing this, if he runs into anything that needs to be changed for the internal plugin, any code change will be post 1.9, right?
It depends on what kind of code change it is. If it's a bug fix, essentially, like it means that there's something broken and it's preventing you from actually being able to use this thing, then we can file a bug, and then we can put out a PR to say, I am addressing this bug.
Okay.
And as long as it's bug level, we're okay. But if it's like, oh, we need this brand new feature, then we're going to need to wait until post.
All right. Awesome. Okay. Sounds good.
All right, cool. So last thing here is I'm setting the deadline as November 30th, which is Thursday, for having all these external changes ready. Oh, actually, before we do that, Chakri, do you want to give an update on the plugins?
Yeah, Shilpa is almost done doing the SIG.
Okay.
So maybe by Wednesday, she will have the complete checked in.
Okay.
And CSI, I just started taking a look at it. So yeah, I will also shoot for that.
Perfect. All right, thank you. And do you think Thursday would be a reasonable deadline for these plugins?
Yeah, let's shoot for it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So then let's set up our next meeting normally on Wednesday, and then we'll do a one-off on Thursday morning to see if we've how far along we are.
Cool. That sounds perfect.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care, guys.
Take care.
Thank you guys. Bye.